Hey, and welcome to oh my gosh, this is the fifth episode of a Divine Twist podcast. And I am here today with the amazing Brad. Brad, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. I'm so excited to have you here. And I'd like to give a little context of how, people that I have on. And the universe brought me to Brad through the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. He and his lovely wife, Shauna, are the Minnesota leaders for the Dystonia Support Group. And man, turns out I'm lucky to live in Minnesota because not every place has an amazing support group. So I just want to give props to you and your beautiful wife. And you are the one that is navigating cervical dystonia. So if you could share with us, well, we already talked about this, where you're located and how long you have been dancing, navigating, having tea with this thing called dystonia, Brad.
Sure. I'm in Roseville, Minnesota. For those who don't know, it's a first-tier suburb in the Twin Cities, just north of St. Paul. And I am having tea at the moment. Um, the I first started having dystonia symptoms in the fall of 2007. I can actually remember the exact day because it happens to be my oldest brother's birthday, so I figure he probably had something to do with it. Uh,
Obviously.
Yeah, well, when I mentioned that to him, he's like, never know. Um, but yeah, started having symptoms in the fall of 2007.
Okay. And so the next question I have is how were you diagnosed and by what type of provider?
Yeah, well, like most people, I went through a variety of doctors before I found someone. Unlike most people, I was diagnosed relatively quickly.
Hmm.
As I said, my symptoms started in the fall of 2007. I had my first doctor's appointment with the primary care physician in January of 2008. Got the sort of typical shoulder shrug, I don't know, kind of thing with that. Because it doesn't show up on an MRI, it doesn't show up on an X-ray, that kind of thing. Um, my wife then tracked down a an orthopedic surgeon to have a look at me, and in fact, that was the reason I had the MRI in the first place. The GP didn't even want to give me an MRI, but the orthopedic surgeon wouldn't see me without an MRI. So the orthopedic surgeon saw me, of course, didn't see anything on the MRI, sent me to PT. The PT not only didn't help, actually made it worse. And so when I had the follow up with the orthopedic surgeon, he then said, you probably need to see a neurologist, referred me to one. And uh, fortunately for me, it happened to be not just a neurologist, but one with a special interest in movement disorders, as they call it. And she basically took one look at me and said, yeah, this is what you have. And that was in March of 2008. So you're talking 6 months from the onset of symptoms to my diagnosis.
Wow. I do just want to go back. It's interesting how you say the surgeon would see you without an MRI and the other doctor didn't, think or want to order the MRI. Did the surgeon, it was like they were going to make their diagnosis based on the imaging, or they didn't really have any idea what was going on?
Right. Yeah, I think it was more the latter. Because he knew that he knew the symptoms I was having based on what my wife had told him when she called and made the appointment, and knew that nothing showed up on the X-ray. So he also pretty much knew if he was going to be able to have anything brilliant to say about it, he wanted to see what an MRI would say about it, um, and of course that plus the fact that the PT was having the exact opposite effect of what PT normally has, kind of told him, hey, this is probably neurological. If the MRI had shown something, different story.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up. And it's great that you were one of the lucky ones, right? Where you have symptoms and then it's like, it doesn't take you 7 years to get a diagnosis. Were you told by the movement disorder doctor the cause of your dystonia?
Not specifically. What she told me was that kind of the general philosophy is that dystonia most dystonias, if not all dystonias, have three components to it. A genetic component, an environmental component, and a trigger factor. But one or more of those may not be diagnosable, may not be obvious. And in my case, really none of them were. While I haven't had any specific genetic testing, I had what you might call the poor man's version of genetic testing, where I had gone for a second opinion, both of the diagnosis and the prognosis. And I went to the University of Minnesota, where they brought in a whole slew of people, neurologists, geneticists, that type thing. The geneticist there kind of told me how expensive genetic testing was and everything, but he said, even if you have one of the genetic forms, most likely it's going to respond to dopamine. And so he said, the cheaper way of doing it is just take this dopamine drug for a couple of weeks and let me know if it helps. And I didn't see any discernible difference. And so he took me off that drug, and that was as close to genetic testing as I got. Um, as far as environmental went, other than having the types of jobs over the years where I had a lot of repetitive motions, which had caused some back injuries and stuff previously, there was nothing specific you could point to. And trigger factor, unlike some people who get it from a traumatic brain injury or some other type of an accident or a reaction to a drug, there was nothing like that with me. So uh, you're basically throwing darts at a board at that point.
So maybe it really was your brother.
It could have been, I've always said he was the Antichrist, so you just never know.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so well, I'll just ask this and then maybe you can tell us. What's the hardest part about all of this for you?
Um, well, it really kind of depends on how I look at it. If on a day-to-day basis, on a daily basis, the hardest part is just the unpredictability of it. That's primarily why I'm on disability, why I don't work. As my father once so indelicately put it, you may not be disabled, but what you are is unemployable, because no employer or not very many employers are going to put up with someone who, regardless of how good of an employee you might be, is missing 4, 5, 6 days a month, and you can't schedule around it because you don't know when the symptoms are going to be flaring up, that kind of thing. For that same reason, I've discovered it even makes volunteering difficult, because when I first stopped working, I looked into volunteer efforts, and many of those, I was somewhat surprised to learn, wanted you to commit to a certain day, a certain time every week or every month. And it's like, well, if I could do that, I would have a job.
Yeah.
And of course, even just pleasurable stuff. You make plans with friends or family, and everyone just kind of has to be prepared that I might cancel at the last minute or whatever. It just depends on what the dystonia is doing, what I feel like. Um, Overall, long term, probably the hardest thing to deal with is the depression and frustration that comes with dealing with it, dealing with uh doctors that don't get it, insurance companies who want to deny you claims, and even not specifically doctors, but the medical, uh what is it I'm looking for, uh the HMOs, the healthcare networks and everything. It's like I had a situation last year where, after seeing the same physical therapist for 14 years, my healthcare network said, well, we're not going to continue to give you a referral there because we have physical therapists in network, and we want the money. We don't want to refer you outside of network, which of course, legally they can't do that, but they just make up some other reason why they're doing it. And
Mhm. Well, yeah, I'm sure the people that have this are nodding their heads. That unpredictability is, especially as humans, one of the six human needs, so I've been told, is certainty. And also the polar is true too. Like, it's good to have some mystery and some, uncertainty in our lives. However, when you have this, And it's like, you don't know if you're gonna have a good day or a bad day or how tired you're gonna be. And so that is definitely one of the things. I liked what you said though about your perspective. Something about you said, well, my perspective about this. Um, so are there things that you do differently now than you did in the beginning as far as dancing and having tea with this thing?
Um, well, for one thing, my regimen for treating it is different. In the beginning, you just don't really know what's going to work.
Mhm.
And of course, different things work for different people.
Right.
Um, the first treatment for me was the botulinum neurotoxin, and I still get that, but in the beginning, it was every 13 weeks, which is fairly standard, 12 or 13 weeks.
Mhm.
And like a lot of people, I was getting huge peaks and valleys with that. It would take a good couple weeks for it to really reach full efficiency, and then would start wearing off by about week 8 or 10. And so you'd have this month-long trough where the one round of injections is wearing off, and then you get the new ones, and it takes a couple weeks for those to come in. So the peaks and valleys were just uh, pretty pronounced.
Mhm.
Um, my neurologist at the time worked with me on that. We adjusted the injections to 12 weeks to 11 weeks. Eventually, we settled in on a sweet spot of 10 weeks,
Mhm.
which mercifully my current insurance actually agrees to and pays for.
Mhm.
And between the hitting the sweet spot with the botulinum injections and developing a regimen that works for me with regular physical therapy, massage therapy, figuring out when I need ice versus when I need heat, uh, which for me, heat is tight muscles, ice is spasming muscles.
Oh,
But
okay.
even after all these years of dealing with it, sometimes I get that wrong. I think I need heat, put the heat on. It's like, oh God, that's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and I also have a TENS unit for which I'm sure you know what that is, but for those who don't, it's a TENS is just a transcutaneous electro nerve stimulator or something to that effect. It's basically patches that you put on your body, and a battery powered pack sends electrical stimulation, and it doesn't really fix anything, but what I find is it tends to mask the pain when things get really bad. It doesn't do anything for tightness, but if the muscles are just painful and spasming,
Mhm.
it helps with that. And so over time, I've developed this regimen of a half dozen tools in the toolbox, and I got a pretty good idea for what works for which symptom. The other thing is just adjusting my expectations for what I can do.
Mhm.
I've I've come to really hate the term disabled. I'm on Social Security disability, and before that, I was on short-term disability, long-term disability, all that. But I tend to be a bit of a literalist, and disabled literally means not able. And
Mhm.
as I say, it's not that I can't do anything. It's not like I can't walk or I can't see or whatever. I can do things. I just can't do them at the level that an able-bodied person can. It might literally take me 2 months to complete a project that it would take an able-bodied person 2 days to complete. A weekend project for them is a 2 month project for me. And so you so I don't get into a bad place of trying to do too much. One of the things that I've developed is when I'm doing a project in the backyard, doing yard work or something like that, which there's always something to be done around the house.
Yeah.
I'll set a timer for like 30 minutes, and when the timer goes off, it's time to take a break, whether I feel like I need a break or not, because if I wait until my body starts talking to me, it's going to be using foul language.
We must be related. Oh, no, I love this. This is so tangible and practical, Brad. The expectations piece and also like that uncertainty, you don't know what's going to happen. That's massive because if we can set ourselves up to be extremely disappointed if we don't set the timer and we don't honor this version of what it means to have a disabled situation or whatever. I think that's a really powerful way to approach this. And you've had a few minutes of practice, it seems like.
I've been what working on 16, 17 years, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, you can tell. This is just my humble observation. You can tell mm, if the thing that someone is doing to either have tea with this or to fight it or to whatever is working based on everything that you're talking about, right? Because if we, at least this is just my perspective about physics, anything that we try to force or push, it usually backfires because we're creating more resistance, we're creating more tension, drag, whatever term you want to use. And so I love what you're sharing because especially for people who might be new on the scene, um, this is something that we can have tea with, we can navigate it and we can dance with it. And the more that you seek out resources that are helpful, you know, it definitely will serve you, right? It's definitely our perspective on everything, or perspective is everything, because if it's all doom and gloom, well, your experience is going to be different than if you're like, well, you know what? Okay, here's the limitation. Here's what I can do. How can I do this in the middle? There's a thing in I guess it's Buddhism, like the middle way. Anyway, it's it's like, and you can't ever figure it out until you're experiencing it yourself, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I couldn't tell you how many times over the years different people, when they talk to me about my experience with dystonia, will tell me, what a great attitude I have. And the funny thing is I don't necessarily see it that way. And it's not that I think I have a bad attitude. It's more I think I have a pragmatic attitude in the
Yes.
sense that when it comes to how I do things and the regimen and everything, it's like, well, I figure my choice is to this is the reality of my life. So my choice is to try to make the best of it and try to continue to do the things that I enjoy doing in the capacity that I can do them. Or the alternative is to sit around and do nothing and have a woe is me attitude. And what's the point of that? So I don't, like I said, I don't view it necessarily of, oh, gee, look at me, I have a great attitude. I view it more of what choice do I have? This is the pragmatic way to approach it.
No, and I think it serves you well, which is why here you are all this time later and you don't have Krabby Patties.
Well, there are days.
Right. It's just that's not what you would lead with, Brad. Oh gosh. Okay, so what are there certain things that makes your dystonia worse?
Uh, Primarily stress. And that can be like mental, emotional stress, but also physical stress. And
Sure.
that's when I mentioned the timer earlier, for example. Even if I'm just doing something physical like my physical therapy exercises, by the time I finish those,
Mhm.
I'm usually shaking.
Yeah.
I've developed a tremor as part of the dystonia over the years, and it gets markedly worse when I'm subjecting my body to physical stress or emotional
Mhm.
stress or anything like that. That's that's the big one.
Okay. Okay. Now, the other side, I mean, you've already hinted to this. What absolutely makes things better, or at least takes the edge off? You mentioned ice, heat, the TENS unit, physical therapy. Sounds like you like to dig in the dirt. Any other things?
Yeah, you know, I do have prescription pain medication and oral medications and things like that, but honestly, I try not to take a lot. Well, the anti-spasm kind of stuff that I take regularly because
Yeah.
you have to stay on top of it. The pain medication, I try not to take all that often. I'll if I'm in pain or I'm spasming, I hit it with the ice first. If the ice is calming it down but not quite doing enough, maybe I'll try the TENS unit. And so it's not necessarily um, an all or nothing
Yeah.
thing. You can do a combination of things, but going for the pain medications, whether over the counter or prescription, is usually my last choice, just because I don't want to take a lot of that if I don't have to. You have the all the potential interactions and
Right.
everything else. So it's basically just kind of whatever works at the time. And one of the things that I tell people in the support group when they'll ask about, well, has anyone tried this treatment or this or that treatment or something else, is I personally get a little uh cautious, shall we say, if it comes to when it comes to things like things you ingest, supplements and things like that. Primarily because that stuff tends not to be regulated much, if at all, and so you don't necessarily really know what you're eating or drinking when you're putting it in your body.
Mhm.
So I tend to shy away from that kind of stuff. But beyond that, people have asked me about things like laser light therapy, for example, or various other treatments, acupuncture, dry needling, things that I haven't personally done. And I haven't personally done them not because I don't want to try them, but
Yeah.
because I'm in a pretty good place with it.
Yeah.
But having said that, my philosophy is give it a try. If it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, stop
Yeah.
doing it. The only caution that I would give people is you might want to try one thing at a time, because if you just throw everything at the wall at the same time, you don't know what's working and what's maybe making you worse or whatever. So, try something, give it a reasonable amount of time to see if it helps, and if it does, stick with it. If it doesn't, try something else.
This is huge. And you and I actually talked about this at one of the group lunches. And this is, I think, I just want to put a pin in this for people to really hear this, because when you receive a diagnosis like cervical dystonia, most humans' tendency is to throw everything in the kitchen sink at it, because it's like I just want this to go away. I just want it to be gone. And so I think this is really good practical advice from someone who has been doing this a long time, is to go slow and go steady. And yes, it's like an elimination diet. If you get rid of everything all at once, you don't know if it's dairy or it's gluten or it's soy, like that's causing a reaction or something. So I think that's such a powerful suggestion and tip, and definitely something that I did not do in the beginning. So I love that you're sharing that, Brad. Here's one of my favorite questions. What has dystonia taught you?
Um, well, it sounds somewhat cliched and trite, but just kind of to live for the moment, if you will. Carpe diem, as they say. Uh, Give you an example of that. My wife and I both love to travel, and as you can imagine, traveling is not the easiest thing in the world with dystonia. I joke that I'm worse than traveling with a little kid because of all the stuff I have to bring with me, just in case things flare up or whatever. And one of our dream trips for both of us had always been to go to Africa and do like a photo type safari, and that costs a lot of money. and and so we always had it on the radar, but we were putting it off, and eventually one day I just kind of told Shauna, I said, look, if we wait till we can afford to pay for this, it's never going to happen. Um and by the time it does, I'm going to be so physically degraded, and maybe you will too, who knows,
Yeah.
that we won't be able to enjoy ourselves. So let's go while we can go, while I can, conceivably get through it,
Mhm.
and figure out how to pay for it later. And I I know that's kind of a first world way of looking at it, if you will. Oh, that's easy for you to say, you'll eventually, but there are worse things than dying in debt. And so if we never figure out how to pay for it, well, the credit card companies get hosed.
Yeah. So you went on the trip, right?
Yes, we went 2022. We were supposed to go in 2020 because the excuse for doing it was, well, I'll be 50 in 2020, so that's a good enough excuse to go. And then came COVID, so we went in 2022.
And how was
Uh,
it?
I survived. There were
Did you get
there
chased
were
by
there
any
were
lion?
moments when we thought I might not survive, because
Wow.
the dystonia did flare up, and there were issues, but um we like I said, I had the tens machine with me, I had ice with me. We made sure to tell the tour guides, the safari guides, and everything that I had a neurologic movement disorder and so forth. So if something started seizing up, because with the cervical, sometimes it'll affect my chest and even my ability to breathe. And so the uninitiated sometimes think I'm having a heart attack when that happens. And so, you give people fair warning. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
start doing that, just get me some ice. I'll be fine. And,
yeah,
don't freak out too much. And
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic trip, and
Oh,
I think it probably took me twice as long to recover physically from the trip as the
yeah,
trip itself lasted. But again, this is one of the trade-offs you make when
yeah,
you're trying to do stuff like this when you have dystonia.
yeah. Well, I know you keep saying that you're not all life is whatever rainbows and unicorns and you're pragmatic. However, every time you answer a question, carpe diem, it seems like you do have a really positive spin on this. Maybe it's just not your perception. It's certainly the one that I'm receiving, and I have so much respect for it. So thank you for sharing all of this, Brad. I do have a question. Is there anything that you've had to let go of because of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's just the general limitations, but the big one would be I used to do pencil sketches. I just take a photograph and do pencil sketches from it. Uh, Not a particularly special talent now that you can do that in 5 minutes with computer software, but people used to think it was neat.
Yeah.
And I had a drafting table and all that kind of stuff. And it's not that I can't do it anymore, although the tremor does make it a little hard to hold a pencil steady. What I can't do is I can't lean over the drafting table for any
Um,
length of time to do that. So, um, while the ability is still there, the ability to lean over a table and do it isn't. And
hmm,
so I was doing it less and less, and then probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I finally just decided it's time to get rid of the drafting table. It's not happening. I'm not going to be able to do this again. And I will admit, got a little misty-eyed when I had to let the old drafting table go, but
yeah.
it was time. It was time to recognize this is just not going to
Yeah.
happen, and move on.
I'm sure lots of people can relate to what you're talking about. So I mean, it's a grieving process, right? It's the whole thing, and then it's things that are special like that we have to, come to terms with. Another question I have for you, let's say when we get off of this interview and you walk into the other room, your dystonia disappears. And you wake up tomorrow morning and you do not have this, what would you do differently if tomorrow you wake up and someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Brad, here's this thing called cervical dystonia"? Would you do anything differently?
Well, because my trip to diagnosis was so abbreviated compared to most people, I can't say that there's anything specific that I would point to in that respect. I'm married to a woman who's probably a bigger advocate for my health than I am, and she's the one who really uh wouldn't take no for an answer and find stuff. But that said, what I would definitely do different is have different disability insurance. And that's because,
Good one.
yeah, well, one of the things that I learned in this process, and it's one of those things that by the time you learn it, it's too late,
Mhm,
is that there are two different kinds of long-term disability insurance: those that you purchase on your own on the open market, and those that you purchase through an employer.
mhm.
And Most people get them through their employer because that's the easiest way to do it. They're governed by two completely separate sets of laws. The one that I had purchased through their employer is governed by federal ERISA law, what they call it. I long since forgotten what ERISA stands for, an acronym for something. Um, and any arguments that you have would be settled on the federal level. The stuff you purchase on your own is through the state. The big difference, however, is the stuff that you purchase on your own that's governed by state law. Basically, if the insurer doesn't want to honor your disability claim, the onus is on them to prove that you're not disabled. With the stuff that you purchase through your employer that's governed by federal law, the onus is on the disabled person to prove that the insurance company acted in a quote arbitrary or capricious manner.
Mhm.
Good luck with that, particularly since there's not a specific legal definition of how to go about demonstrating what is arbitrary, what is capricious,
Right.
and so if an insurance company just says, hey, we don't want to pay you this claim, which when you're a relatively young person with a lifetime of long-term disability in front of you, they tend to not be too keen on paying. It's incredibly difficult to win that fight because the law is stacked against you. But
Wow.
nobody knows. Even I've talked to HR managers since this, and even they don't know this. And the
It's
the
a,
ones
yeah.
who as an employee you would go to and talk to about long-term disability and stuff like that. Even they don't know that kind of stuff. So
Okay, well, this is awesome because again, awareness, awareness, awareness. The thing that's why I asked the question because hey, if a light bulb goes off and we can tell another person, we don't ever want anyone to have this diagnosis. However, if you do, you need to be informed, right? Because
yep.
Lord knows, thank you for going before and giving us all this incredible wisdom, Brad. Um, what do you wish people would understand or know about dystonia?
Um, the I guess it depends on whether we're talking about people who are recently diagnosed or people who aren't.
Both people, a message
Right,
for
right.
both those who are navigating it and those who are maybe with a loved one or just general. Yeah.
Exactly. And for the people who are trying to navigate it themselves, the people with dystonia, um, I think the big thing is just recognizing that your life has changed and will change. I've talked with people through the support group before who have told me things very bravely that along the lines of, we're not going to let this dictate who we are. We're not going to we're not going to let this dictate our lives and everything. And it's like, yeah, to a certain extent you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not going to go away because you will it to go away. And so you have to recognize that your life has changed and you have to figure out how to make the best life under the new circumstances. And you're really the only one who can do that because you know what's important to you
Mhm.
and what you want to accomplish. For people who don't have dystonia and are either a caregiver or a friend, relative, something like that, I think they just need to recognize two things. One is that it is to a certain extent an invisible disability, if you will. Not only does it not show up on X-rays and scans and that type of thing, but it it's you don't even necessarily see it. I mean, with the pulling and stretching and tilting of my head and everything, it's minor enough that the people who notice it are the people who see me all the time, my therapist and that type of thing. Most people on the street wouldn't really look at me and know just
Oh
from
no.
looking at me there's something wrong.
Right.
Um, and so just because someone looks like they're okay doesn't necessarily mean they feel okay. They may be having a very bad day and feel terrible. And therein is the second part of what I was going to say is the people, the loved ones, the friends, the relatives of the people with dystonia have to themselves be flexible. They have to understand that dystonia people are going to cancel plans at the last minute, or even if they're just having a bad day mentally, the I can't deal with this kind of thing. They may cancel plans, and don't take it personally. Be there for them, support them, and don't take it personally that maybe they bailed on Christmas or something like that, but they didn't do it because they wanted to. They did it because they felt terrible.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So good. Thank you for sharing both of that. And again, you have so much wisdom about this stuff. And because you're so positive, it's just lovely. Okay. Anything else, any words of wisdom, anything that's coming up just about, your life, this experience, anything that you feel called to, shout out before we wrap this up with a bow, Brad?
Well, I think two things that I would say is one, if you don't already have a pet, get a pet. Uh, it's whether you are trying to navigate this alone, living alone, or you have someone with you, you're probably going to be spending more time alone than what you did before, if you're to the point where you're on disability or something like that. And particularly if I'm having a bad day where I just don't feel like doing anything other than laying in the chair on the heating pad, on my neck, or whatever. Nothing beats a warm kitty in the lap. Well, for me, I mean, for some people it's a dog, but I love dogs too. They're just more maintenance than my cat. And
Mhm.
you've got the whole unconditional love kind of thing, and it's it's it helps the mental side of things, if nothing else, to have a pet in your life.
I
Uh,
couldn't agree more. Yeah.
the other thing that I would say is just not to be, sometimes people get a little hung up on what people think about how they look or how they move or how they act. For example, I've got this thing around my neck right now. It's actually a heater, providing heat on my neck muscles. And there are those out there who would be appalled to go out with something like this wrapped around their neck. I don't care if it's serving its purpose. That's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And you kind of have to break out of that shell. And as an extension of that, don't be afraid to ask for accommodations. I mean, for example, when I travel, I may not be requiring a wheelchair per se, although there are times I do. But even if I'm ambulatory, I'll still request priority boarding on the airplane as one of those people who requires extra time because I have a movement disorder. I don't move very fast. And
Yeah.
when you've got a slew of people behind you trying to push through and that type of thing, no, you board with the people who are in wheelchairs and have small children or whatever, and take as much time as you need, and don't be afraid to ask for that. I have yet to find an airline anywhere who tells me no, you can't do that. And
Yeah. Hmm.
and even if they do, okay, that's the worst that happens is they tell you no. So
Yeah. Ah, you are this, all of this is why Brad makes an amazing leader for the dystonia support group here in Minnesota with his amazing wife that he has referred to multiple times. She's amazing. And so we will, especially for people that are listening that are in Minnesota, or I mean, are you open to people that are in the near vicinity? Because this
yeah,
is,
well, I mean, actually, the Minnesota support group has members that are outside of Minnesota simply because we're the closest support group. They don't necessarily come to our in-person meetings, but they'll be on our Facebook group and that kind of thing. But I've also had people that who have contacted me from uh, other states, southern states. I've had people contact me during the pandemic when we started doing everything virtually. I had people contact me from like Malaysia saying, "Hey, can we sit in on your dystonia meeting? There's none around here." And um, so yeah.
amazing. This is why you're so good at your job. You actually do have a job.
Oh, I know.
So, oh my gosh, this has been rich beyond measure. I love how practical, applicable, reasonable, and also positive you are. And you're a wise soul, and definitely having navigated this for so long, you have such great grounded wisdom. So I just want to thank you for taking the time, the energy, and the bandwidth to come hang out with me on a video interview for the YouTubes, Brad.
My pleasure.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll put the way to communicate with Brad in the description. So you can reach out to him. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.